final speaker tonight is Bryce Merrill, making music a living and a difference. His experience is in strengthening art and culture sectors and communities they serve. Bryce is going to share his perspective on music as an important element for Commons. Please help me welcome Bryce.
Hi there. Thanks. Is this thing
on?
Great. Thanks so much for having me. I wrote my first song at 15, armed with a tablature chord book and a 1960s Chet Atkins model Gibson hollow body guitar with a Bigsby tremolo. For those of you who don't know, playing by tablature on a guitar like that, that's good rock and roll feedback. Playing by tablature on a guitar like that is like taking a Maserati through the drive-thru for a cheeseburger. I was no rock prodigy, but I was determined to rock. My friend Clay and I performed a House of the Rising Sun style number for his dad, a musician. He listened and smiled, and when we were finished, he looked at us and he said, "Boys, that sounds good, but you really should have tuned my guitar before you played it." We should have, and I should have known then that my musical career was a song written with a lot of heart and a few fatal flaws, but I didn't. At 18, I toured the country in punk bands and hated the man, but by 22, what I really hated was bussing tables and sharing a couch bed with my bandmates' dogs, one of which was perpetually gassy, and the other growled if I moved in the middle of the night. The sun set on my struggling career as a musician, and I went on to become an academic, which I always thought of as a nice lateral career move. I wrote a dissertation on the sociology of music, specifically focusing on the paradox of hobbyist home music recording. I studied ethnographically people who write and record hundreds of songs and share them with almost no one. Participants in my research expressed that what interests them about recording music that they never shared was the creative process, particularly when it was unencumbered by notions of success. See, they were interested in making music, not making it in music. So I wrote about the intrinsic value of music and how making and listening to music can create moments of what Robert Perrin-Benayagam calls reflexive catharsis, or states of pleasure brought on by emotional release. I tried to understand how music soothes the savage beast and all of its other tricks of musical self-transformation. The idea that music and art can have intrinsic impact or can be valuable to an individual's worldview or sense of self or even spiritual well-being has been popularized by scholars such as Alan Brown and Rebecca Bradskin and Jennifer Novak-Leonard. And I think most people value music as an inherent good because they understand the power of aesthetics. They feel the allure of beauty in all of its forms, whether they put it that way or more simply. I certainly know this to be academically true. There's literature to support it, but I also know it personally. While I no longer have designs on music as a path to financial enrichment, playing music remains an invaluable part of my life, not as a hobby, but as a passion deep in my bones. I retired early from academia and have worked in the public and nonprofit cultural sectors for the last few years, but I've remained interested in music as force, as Tia Denora calls it. Music in action, she says, can change hearts and minds, but it can also transform structural relationships, influence macro-social patterns, and create large and small-scale community cohesion and even dissent. Here are a couple examples of music as force. Music has the ability to literally change minds. In his book Musicophilia, famed neuroscientist Oliver Sacks details how we're starting to understand more clearly how music physically affects the brain and thus cognition. Beyond just enhancing our mental and physical health, music can actually save it. Programs like Guitars for Vets demonstrate that songwriting and performing can be a tonic for soldiers suffering from the destructive effects of PTSD. Then there are educational programs like Youth on Record in Denver, where professional musicians teach 4-credit classes in public schools with high dropout rates, producing dramatic attendance and graduation improvements. This is a professional musician, Kaylin Heffernan, with her students at Youth on Record's Youth Media Studio. Music has also long been associated with social movements, bringing challenging conversations into the public discourse. A recent project by Sean King of Devotchka and Raul Pacheco of Ozomatli continues this tradition, turning their focus to immigration and the experience of DREAM Act kids. The project is called Los Dreamers, and it's gaining momentum nationally as a musical voice for immigration reform. And while there's good reason to be critical of economic impact claims, we do know, as evidenced by studies in Seattle and Nashville and Denver, that music is a creative industry capable of driving economies. The music industry, which does include musicians, creates both direct and indirect employment, including jobs in related sectors such as hospitality and tourism. Music is definitely an engine of growth in Colorado. The state has over 16,000 music-based jobs, and our music industry generates $1.8 billion in annual revenues. Not surprisingly, this positions the state's music industry as the largest in the Rocky Mountain region. A caveat about music's economic impact is important here. Globally, the music industry continues to struggle to develop equitably and sustainably. Even in cities known for their scenes, musicians struggle to make a living. The city of Austin just released a study of the economic conditions of their musicians, and the results are disheartening, if not a little obvious to those on the ground. Making music in the live music capital of the world, which is what Austin calls themselves, is a risky proposition. Imagine how hard it is in other places. So these elements of music as force are what consumes most of my time. Because I regularly work with mission-driven organizations, I'm encouraged to explore and advance programs and policies that harness the power of music to create social good. I have had the privilege of working all over Colorado, including Fort Collins, and I want to show off a homegrown example of music in action. The Flowbots are a hip-hop band from Denver, and one of their founders is a CSU graduate. They had a national hit song in 2008 called Handlebars. It was an anthem for all of the big and small ways people can make a difference in a world that desperately needs them to. The song was a huge hit. At the moment, it has over 25 million views on YouTube. There are acoustic bedroom versions, dubstep versions, instrumental karaoke versions. This is a crude but impressive measure of the impact of this song. But even more impressively, Flowbots immediately translated massive market success into a nonprofit organization aimed at music-based community mobilization and education. Many successful musicians give to charities or start foundations, but what the Flowbots did was different. They weren't just being corporately responsible, they were being communally responsive. The nonprofit that they founded became Youth on Record, the aforementioned educational program. And Youth on Record is quickly being recognized as a national model for music-based solutions to problems with education, affordable housing, and even equitable access to transit-oriented development. It's a legitimate movement, and Flowbots were the musical force behind it. The latest project of the band's founders, Jamie Laurie and Stephen Brackett, aka Johnny Five and Brer Rabbit, continues to combine their passion for music and community. No Enemies is a song-sharing project where Laurie and Brackett immerse themselves in communities to learn local songs, write new ones, and share the power of singing as a form of public expression. one that can be quickly mobilized to combat specific social problems such as environmental racism or socioeconomic inequality. No Enemies is about making music, but it's also about making a difference. And it's the product of a band that's been able to make a living as musicians, a point that cannot be overstated here. And so there's the hook to this presentation. One answer to the question, how can we live and work here? And of course, my answer is music. We can live and work and thrive here by fostering opportunities to make music and collectively sharing in the benefits of musical experiences. We can develop programs and policies, events and celebrations that improve the economic conditions of our musicians and music industry, understanding that this investment in music is an investment in the larger Fort Collins economy. And finally, we can seek out and support models for making and sharing music that improve all of our quality of life. We know Fort Collins has challenges to sustainable and equitable growth, but I also want us to know that music can provide solutions to these challenges. Fort Collins has many incredible resources that bode well for the advancement of this work. You have an organically vibrant music community with nonprofits, schools, and businesses, all with a genuine passion for this place. You have excellent and committed higher educational resources. You have city and state support for art and music, and you have the Bohemian Foundation with its support of music and career growth, youth engagement, and live music. I spent a lot of time studying music communities from this perspective, and I can say with some certainty that all the pieces are here and some. I want to leave you with a few questions that I'm thinking about these days, specifically with regards to music in Fort Collins. First, how can Fort Collins organize and focus its music-based economic development and community building? How can the music community help create coalitions around shared issues? Access to affordable housing is not just a problem for musicians, so how can our solutions be more inclusive? And finally, how is the music community responding to the demographic shifts in northern Colorado and statewide so that we're developing a truly inclusive scene? There are other questions, but let's start here. If anybody has good insights or answers to these, please email me or find me later. I'd love to get together and talk about strengthening Fort Collins by strengthening music. Thanks.